Hey guys, what's going on? It's Mike and Jenny. We've been in the MLM industry now for 8 years, working it together now, especially in the last year, and we've got some advice and some strategies and tips and tricks for you. So, come on back.
One of the things we get asked about a lot is spouses and how to work this business together, and how was Mike so supportive from day one, and what does it look like? So we have 5 tips for you to help you on your journey to bring your spouse along in this process with you, because it's super important, I think, to work it as a unit. Even though Mike wasn't physically working the business with me, we've always viewed it as our business. I think that's one of our first tips, is make sure you view it as something that you guys are doing together. Even though I was the person with the boots on the street, it was a family business. We even approach it that way with Charlotte. Reward ourselves together, help explain why sometimes I was working. And even with Charlotte, we let her know, because I missed this, we went to Disney World or whatever. So anyway, 5 tips, you guys. The first one is really understanding why you're doing this and making it clear and communicating as a family. What is the purpose behind the business?
Communication is so key. And I can tell you that my support would have been 100% either way, no matter what. But if her goal was to, get an extra $500 a month because she wanted to buy a different jacket every month, my support, I sort of been on board 100%, but it would have looked different compared to when she said, hey, I want to retire myself. I'd like to be in a position where if you want to retire, you can do that as well. Okay, now that gives me a good landscape, a good picture of, what kind of work and effort and time that this is going to take, so I can set my expectations, to that.
Absolutely. From day one, my goal really was to be home with our daughter. I started this business when she was 2 months old, and I wanted out of corporate. And so we were very clear that that was the whole point behind the business. Because, if we're being honest, you guys, neither one of us had free spare time laying around. We were older parents. It was first time having kids. I was 42. I was working 70 hours a week. Mike was on the road half of the year. A business didn't really fit, but because I was very clear on the different lifestyle I wanted, and we both saw this as a vehicle to get there, we were willing to make the sacrifices that needed to happen to get there. But we were also realistic about what the process was going to look like. Because in the network marketing space, you guys, there is no ceiling to what type of income you can earn, but there is an amount of work that it takes to build the foundation. So if someone is telling you, oh, it's going to be super easy, you can make 6 figures in a month, or you can do this, really take a step back, because the model is very simple, but it takes work. So first thing is understanding why you're doing this and being very clear on that. I've had spouses that came into the business and they really were looking to fund a trip once a year somewhere. And then after they successfully had done that, they shifted into why they were doing that. There's nothing wrong with shifting, but just make sure you're communicating with your spouse, because if Mike thought that this was about $500 a month, and all of a sudden I shifted gears into I want a professional income and I was doing all these other things, he'd be very confused.
Yeah, I'd be confused time-wise and the expectations that we had set up right from the get-go. If she's down in the office, working a lot of hours, I'm going, what the heck?
$500 a month, what are you
putting
doing?
in all this work for a pair of shoes or two,
Right.
we'll figure it out. But now that I know what the long-term goal is, the vision is. Now I can set those expectations and be realistic about it. Understanding, hey, you're not going to be able to make life-changing money by working 15 minutes a day. It's just not how it works.
Not realistic. And I think that's another key point. So the next one is moving right into timeline, being really clear on how much time are you going to give yourself to hit this big goal, and then breaking it down into smaller. So when I first came into the industry, I heard one of my leaders had hit 6 figures in 6 months. And I was like, I want that. That's what I want. But reality hit. I was working 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week in my career, the career that I was in. And it wasn't realistic for me to leave my career until this business was in a certain place, because our finances required us, unless we were going to drastically change things. And we didn't want to do that. We didn't think that that was a wise thing for the two of us. So I had to adjust my timeline. 6 months wasn't realistic based on how much time I could put towards this business. So we together had it in our head that within 2 years, I was going to be able to walk away from my corporate career. Now, some of this, you guys, it's not an exact science. So we didn't know for sure if that was going to happen, but we were committed as a couple that that's what we were driving for.
Well, in the first couple months, we're just trying to get our feet wet.
Absolutely.
And understanding, what does this look like? How many people do we need to talk to?
Right.
And then once we got a base for that, then we could start setting those expectations and start breaking it down, like Jenny said,
Yes.
into smaller goals where, okay, our big goal is 2 years, but now let's break that down. If we're, in how much do I have to do to get so far in a year? Okay, now let's break that down to 6 months. Now let's break it down to every month and a half, to every week, to every day. Now we're getting some realistic expectations. But the other key thing with that is adjusting those expectations and those goals, because sometimes, and I've worked in, but they don't work perfect. And a perfect example that I can think of, just because I've been in baseball my entire life, and is I would see players get these unrealistic goals, such as, hey, I don't want to strike out all year, or, I want to get 3 hits every game. Well, you go 1 for 4 your first game out, and boom, there goes your goal, your shot.
Yeah.
And being able to, and then I've seen those same players shut down and be like, well, shoot, I already blew that goal. But having the sense that, okay, if it's something that's not reachable, if I'm not on track like I thought I was going to be, now let's adjust the goal and come up with a new set of goals, and then we'll adjust those as well. So not being, you're not putting this in stone, but you're just getting yourself a good mark, so somewhere to shoot. And then you can adjust your goals, your smaller goals as you go.
Which is exactly what we did, you guys, because we were thinking 6 figures, 6 months. And then we realized, okay, that is doable in the industry, but not with the amount of time that I had to put towards the business. So be realistic, be open to have the conversations, and then adjust as need be. So it's that understanding the time frame, the timeline you want to work within, understanding your end goal, and then understanding that if it changes, you communicate with one another like, whoa, this is bigger than I thought it was going to be. I didn't realize. Because what happened with us after we did hit that goal, you guys, it was just a little under 2 years, and we communicated that goal. We were very open with people, like, I am going to leave my corporate job within 2 years. And people would go, are you serious? And I'd be like, yep, we're well on our way. And we didn't know that for sure, but that was what we were working towards, and we were speaking it and believing it and moving towards it. But we adjusted as we needed to, because with him being on the road and with me working full time, there were pieces of the business that we weren't aware of when we stepped into what was required.
Life throws you curveballs.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, so you have to adjust.
Absolutely. 100%.
And another thing is, I just want to reiterate the communication aspect. And there's an example that I can think of, it just comes to the top of my head, that happened quite some time ago. But a business partner had come in with these goals of, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was not life-changing goals. It was, some extra cash here
Yep.
and there, and that was about it. And that was the goal, and that was the mark that they had set.
Yep.
Well,
and they hit that
and
really
they hit
fast.
it quick, and all of a sudden her goals changed to, okay, now I really get this. Now she made some changes of, hey, I want this to be life-changing
Yeah.
type of money. Well, she didn't quite communicate with that with her husband, and all of a sudden her husband's going pretty much the scenario that we
Right.
had said,
Just
where
confused.
yeah, he was like, why in the world, I never see you anymore, so on and so forth. And obviously that's a whole nother issue, but it all stemmed from
Just
the fact
communicating.
that she didn't communicate that this was going to be happening, and that there were going to be some steps that were going to be put in there that were going to take away a little bit of time. But that's kind of what can happen when it doesn't, because we've seen it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and this leads really well into our last 2 points, which kind of go hand in hand. So it's like the workflow, the weekly, how are we going to get this done, and what's on the agenda, and being able to ask for help. So one of the things we started doing very early on, especially because our schedules were so crazy, first time parents, he was on the road a lot. I was working a lot in corporate, didn't have a lot of control of my schedule. So we had to really communicate about what was going on in the week ahead, and even the week ahead, so that we were on the same page. Because if in this business, you guys, depending on what company you're with, will depend on how often you need to be out of the home. We're fortunate that we're with a company where we're not required to do those types of parties, but we still have events from time to time. And so it was important that we were able to look at the calendar, because if Mike was going to be home alone one night, just aware that he had to do dinner and he had to do bath time and some of that stuff, so that he wasn't caught off guard with it. Because the worst thing that you can do is catch one another off guard, and then he's off his game, spiraling to try to manage the household, and I'm stressed out because he's stressed out. Like, just find ways to communicate what's coming in the week or the next week, and where the possible support, or where maybe the difference in your schedule could happen.
And we know this from experience, because we, by no stretch, were perfect with that.
Oh no,
and
we
still
learned
aren't.
it the hard way.
And
we
still
learned
aren't.
a lot of this the hard way. And one of the approaches we've had is where we start to feel like, why is this stressful? Like, why are we out of our groove? And then we're like, okay. And this happened with month end, remember?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I was like, every month end, I'm massively stressed out. And it was like, okay, time out. If we know month end is a stressor, and a lot of times Mike would be on the road, what strategies can we implement to help ease that?
And I just had a notification a week and a half ago, because it got to a point where
we do
I had to start
reminders.
to put a reminder in, and it pops up, remind Jenny about month end, and it would pop up on I want to say the 27th or 26th
Yep.
of each month, just to start greasing the tracks, so
Yes.
that she can plan if I was on the road, whether it would be putting something together for a casserole or
Yes.
something for easy for our daughter and her. And now when I'm home, now that I've been home for a year, I still do it, because things will pop up. Hey, Mike, I have an event tonight, or I have an event
Yep.
next week.
Or
that-
your team may need you.
Yeah,
Like
it
month
just
end, you
happens.
just want to be available, and that, I mean, I remember when you started doing that, because no matter, I'm a creative and not great at planning. He is way better at planning. And so even with us sitting down and kind of going through our schedule, things would fall through the cracks, because it's just not a strength of mine. And so he would pick up the slack by doing things like that with reminders, and then we would be able to put things in place to make it easier and less stressful during certain moments because there are month from month, there are certain things that happen every month in this industry that you just plan for. So those weekly meetings, kind of putting together strategies that are going to help, super, super, super important. Which leads us into the last category, which is asking for help. And I think we see this so often with especially the wives, right? Typically it's the wives that are building the business, not always, but typically, especially with the company that we're with, where they'll go, my husband just doesn't get it. He just doesn't support me.
We run into
He
this
just
so
doesn't
much.
get it.
Yeah.
And the first question we ask is, have you ever communicated with him what help looks like for you? Because 9 times out of 10, spouses want to help, you guys. They just don't know what to do. And Mike, from day one in our marriage, has been so good about don't try to have me guess what you need, because I will likely not figure it out. Just tell me.
And I remember that conversation
I do
because
too.
she had actually done that.
I was pissed.
Yeah, she was really upset with something, and I flat out told her, I can't read your mind, and if you need something, you have to tell
Just
me.
tell me.
It's no problem, but don't wait for me to try
Or
to
assume.
or don't wait for me to guess it, because it's not going to happen.
Yep. And it could, and a lot of times I think why we do that, because it's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable to say, you know what, I need help. Do you mind doing dinner this week? Because we put the guilt on ourselves that we're supposed to do dinner or whatever it is, laundry, whatever. But here's the reality.
And that's not like that at our home.
At all, but I
lot-
think women put that pressure. It's an internal pressure that never came from the spouse. And if you view your marriage as a partnership, and you view building this business as a partnership, it means that people are going to take different roles from time to time. I mean, Charlotte takes on a role from time to time when I'm doing a call. When Mike was on the road and I needed 20 minutes of uninterrupted time for a call, Charlotte had to take on a certain role, whether she wanted to do it or not. And that meant I had to sometimes get creative with what her role was and how to keep her occupied during that 20 minutes. So if help looks like for you taking the kid 2 nights a week for 2 hours uninterrupted, ask for it. If it looks like doing dinner 2 nights a week or meal prepping for the week, ask. Maybe it's laundry. I don't know what it is, but until you're clear with where the stress points are and where it's hard for you, spouses want to help you guys.
And if you have to write it down, write it down.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have the best memory. I've got a great long-term memory, but not a great short. So, anything you can do to help with that, of just communicating whatever it is that you might need, next week or today, or, however it is with your situation. But just make sure that you're communicating, and don't assume he's going to know that you need help, because chances are he probably doesn't and probably won't.
And don't assume if he forgets that he doesn't want to help, because this is new for both of you. And because you're touching the business 24/7, which is pretty typical of the person building the business, they don't understand what they don't understand, not because they don't care, because they haven't been reading all of the information and building their skill set and doing that like you have. So give them the benefit of the doubt and just have that open dialogue. I'll share one last thing with you, because I think this is so key. We had a retreat not long ago, and we surprised all of the retreat attendees with a video from their husband, talking to them about how proud they were and just what they saw in them. And every single spouse was in tears, and every spouse, you guys, this is important for you to grasp. Every spouse, no one knew that we did these videos, and every spouse had concerns about how supportive their husband was of the business and what they had made up in their head that was going on in their spouse's head, but they had never had the conversation with the spouse. They just made it up. And when they saw the video of how the spouse really felt and how proud they were and how much they appreciated what they were doing and how they were improving themselves and all that, they were in tears. So don't assume that you know what is going on in your spouse's mind, because you don't.
And this goes both ways.
Absolutely.
Guys, and I would catch myself in a rut sometimes where I wouldn't communicate to Jenny just how much I appreciated how hard she was working and the things that she was doing for her family. So from the guys or the spouse, the off spouse, don't assume that your wife or husband knows that you appreciate it.
Yeah.
Because there's a pretty good chance they don't. If you heard from what Jenny just said, they were all shocked when they got those videos from their husbands. So don't be afraid to communicate, even if that's put a reminder in your phone once a month, something, just so that you convey just how much you do appreciate all the hard work that she's putting in for herself, number one, and the family and God and whatever it is that's on your list. Don't assume that she knows, because she probably doesn't.
Yep, it's true. And the last thing I will say about just a tip is educate yourself about the industry. You don't have to become an expert in the particular company that you're with or any of that, because
I don't know anything about skincare.
and it's
Nothing.
totally fine. But he was good about educating himself about the possibility of the industry so that he wasn't a non-believer in what we were trying to accomplish, because the reality is this industry is super powerful. And so do yourself a favor and educate yourself. And there's a lot of ways that you can do it. There's podcasts out there, there's blogs, all kinds of things, but just do some basics so you understand the power of leverage, the typical comp plans in our industry, and what's possible, because you don't want to be part of the negative naysayers that your wife is already battling as she grows the business. So know your why. You guys make sure you're communicating why it is that you're doing this business, why you think it's a good idea, why is it even worth taking some time away from family and that kind of stuff. Have your timeline and your long-term goal. So knowing your timeline as well as like what is it that you're ultimately trying to accomplish, and then sit down and talk about your week. Maybe it's the week ahead, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's the month, whatever works for you guys. So you guys can do kind of those watch outs of, oh my gosh, there's events or month end or whatever. And then ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help and just have that open dialogue. It will do wonders as you guys grow the business in a way that makes sense for you and your family, because it looks different for all of us, right?
Yes.
Have a great day, you guys.